Hi, I'm Philip, founder and the roaster at White Star Coffee here in Belfast.
And I'm James, head of Green. Been around coffee for a little while. Started roasteries, developed, worked for big companies, worked for small companies. Then again, met Philip back in 2017, and yeah, we kind of kicked this show off, trying to do things differently in comparison to what roasteries we're doing currently in Ireland. And I think we've set a fair amount of fire under certain people, which is great. That's kind of the idea. Become a little bit of a catalyst.
How did you guys meet? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I was working for one of the biggest coffee companies in the world, kind of no brander, and I just landed a big UK Subway deal for them. And I went back to my old coffee roasters to meet my sales manager to get things moving. And lo and behold, this guy in a white shirt, full business mood, rocks in and was asking every question under the sun about coffee extraction, espresso. And that was just kind of the first time we met. And then he let me into the secret that he was heading to London Coffee Fest the next day. And so was I, without work, to do something on one of my own projects. And we met up there, and the rest was pretty much history, to be honest.
And that was the first time I met you, Tim, in 2017, March 2017 in ICO.
So White Star was born around the time that we met.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Fantastic. Tell us about the scene, though, in Northern Ireland.
Probably 7 to 5 years ago, the specialty coffee scene got started in Northern Ireland. It took off at the boom. There was probably 3 shops doing things incredibly well, kind of dotted up the spine, if you will, of Northern Ireland, doing really, really well. And then from that, a lot of places started opening up because they saw coffee shops not necessarily being a huge chain style, but you could be independent, do your own thing, source your coffee from different roasters, and kind of kick that off. From there, it's went from strength to strength to strength, and Northern Ireland's a little bit of a weird microcosm of food and coffee, in that we have a bunch of Michelin star restaurants, a bunch of really, really good cafes using roasters from all around the world, and having been lucky enough to travel to a fair few different cities across the world. There's probably a solid amount of coffee shops that you can go into here and just get a really, really good cup of coffee, good filter, good espresso.
The DURAN family coffee.
I got lucky enough. We've built up some really good relationships with green importers, and I kind of have a reputation for buying weird and wonderful and a lot of experimental stuff. So it's great news for me because I get all these incredible coffees. Really bad news for Phil because he's got to roast them. So that makes things a little.
Not another one. Just give me a washed coffee, please.
You're picking some of these hybrids up, and the reason they're H3, H17 is that the hybrid hasn't developed its full strain yet. So it's not the other coffee from the DURANs we have is Central Americano. So that was a stable strain of a hybrid that has now been identified and is repeatable. Whereas H3, H17 is still a little more volatile, hence the 2 hybrid varieties inside the crop, but they seem to be very stable for growing, which is great. But I happen to be in Boston talking to a guy called Rick Reinhardt, who used to be the head of the SCA. And one of our grain importers rang me and said, "Hey, are you going to be in Boston?" I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" He's like, "We've got 2 bags of this experimental lot. We can bring 50 grams of it up with us. Would you be available to cup it?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." So after my meeting, I then bombed across to their stand, and we cupped the coffee together, and it tasted like, are you familiar with that? It's like maybe it might just be a UK-based thing, but remember the juice on Bongo used to come in a carton?
Yeah, I remember Bongo.
So it literally tasted like Bongo.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this? I was like, all right. I was like, we'll take some of that. So the bags were actually en route to the States. They were coming from Costa Rica, experimental lot, up to the States, and we got them diverted into Europe the very last minute. So they'd asked us, like, would you take them? Of course. I was like, yeah. And then rang Phil later on that evening. They were like, hey, by the way.
So what is the challenge? You said it's a real challenge to roast these as opposed to a normal washed coffee. What are you finding?
The key things about these, it's a bit like a natural, the black honey process is where Costa Rica, where the climate isn't right to have a proper natural coffee. So they have,
harder.
yeah. So they end up being really excellent at honey process. So the black honey is as close as you can get to a natural process. So they let it go until the mucilage literally starts to turn black. So the sugars have got the longest time to absorb into the beans. And so based on that high sugar content, which makes the coffees, obviously sugar will want to caramelize, and if it's caramelized, it's giving off heat. So literally coming up the first crack, a lot of these coffees will want to take off even more than, say, a natural coffee. So it's just getting the control, the heat control, airflow control, just to make sure that the coffee doesn't rise up too much, come up the first crack, or rise up at all. And therefore you don't mute the flavors or taste or add any ashy or burnt taste to it by over roasting the sugars.
What is it about the attraction to these quirky coffees? Is this because you have a love for strange flavors? Where does it come from, do you think?
There's kind of two things that kind of almost interlink almost perfectly, if you will. You've got the kind of core of what White Star is, so trying to get better at what we're doing, trying to push the boundary of what's happening in the scene, push the boundary of barista knowledge, try to continue to equip people with more or even wider experiences of what coffee can be. You've got that. And then the hilarious thing is sometimes those experimental lots are the lots that might give a gateway to a farmer to do something completely different or change their livelihood. For instance, the DURANs, they produced Couture for a long time, which is great. And it's more of a volume lot. There's 40, 50 bags, whatever it is. But this opportunity with the black honey was then affording them the ability to see that there is a marketplace for something like this. And there is idiots out there like us who will buy those things
And mugs to roast them.
and mugs to roast them. So there's the opportunity that we end up being involved in is that we're not crazy small, but because we're small and agile, we then get opportunities to purchase these coffees that they might be a one-off experiment. They might be a little tiny part of the plot that they're trying to figure out something new or different processing.
If there was one thing that you've really learned, could you share that with us?
Well, for me, everything was, because I came from outside this industry. I won't even go into all my different checkered history, employment history, but it's pretty varied. So everything was new to me, and I came into this just, I suppose, like a lot of people who do, as a sponge and just absorbed it. But I think the one big thing is that stands out is the impact that we can actually have as roasters on the farmers and their families directly. And perhaps that comes with the fact that we end up with quite a lot of these experimental lots and a lot of one-off or two-off bags. So we probably see it a lot closer at hand than maybe what a lot of roasters would do. But that would definitely be the impact that we can actually have.
What's your favourite way to brew this coffee? Always good to know what the roaster's preference is.
At home I brewed V60. I use the Japanese papers, so they tend to be faster. So at home I have a little Comandante that's usually around 23, 24 clicks, and it'll brew 18 grams, 30 grams out, and it comes out with those papers. It comes out in about 2 minutes 20, 2 minutes 30. It just depends on obviously what way you brew, but I tend to somewhere in between James Hoffman's recommended method he does and Scott Lyle's, so somewhere in there.
If you could have a cupping session with any three people, who would they be?
I think my personal one, a little bit of I don't really have that many, not idols or people I'd look up to, but George Hoyle has been ahead of the game for so long, so heavily involved. If I had a chance to do a cupping session with anybody in the world, it would definitely be George Hoyle.
Nice choice. Yeah?
And my one is Alice Cooper.
He doesn't need any coffee.
Just who would not want to have a cupping session with probably the coolest guy on the planet. So yeah.